Recording and it's running around.
That's funny. We'll give everybody a couple minutes. Can you hear me, Janice?
Yep, I can hear you.
I saw a couple people logged on and then they disappeared, so we'll see if
Oh,
everyone
okay.
gets in.
Yeah.
Hey,
Songs on.
there's a packet of things. There's like 2 different sets and then 1 individual.
Did you get to see New America, the little islands off the side?
Yes, the desert islands.
Yeah.
We took a tour, so we did went up into the.
Yep, all those pages. Yep.
This was on the desert island. That was really nice.
Which one?
This was from what I thought.
So that,
Yeah.
that one was something.
Not
Let's see.
conservative as I thought.
This is a single one.
Didn't
Then there's a whole packet of these.
Oh, yeah, very different on it.
That was like on top of this.
So where the.
Okay, so somebody was missing the rest of the pages.
That, and the long white road, yeah.
Is that what
Yeah,
it's?
Or.
Oh, I might have. Oh, my God. What about the construction of the line? Yeah, there's. He's still back. Oh, yeah, I'm sure why it's from. Oh, and he didn't want 9 seconds. Yeah, miles long, but it's too much more than slow. And because I get people to car and town homes and stuff and to live in that. And it's like a completely enclosed community.
Really. Any of that here.
All right, guys. We will, it's 3 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. And anybody else that joins can join. Janice, is it just you or do you have other people with you?
Nope, they're all on Zoom.
Okay, awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining. I'm so happy to see so many of your faces. I knew this would be a fun class and we can engage a good group of you guys. As anyone else joins, they can come on in. I am going to record this one. I feel like this might be something that you can always refer back to later, or those who couldn't join us could take a peek at it later. So this class is really an hour long, but I budgeted an hour and a half because I was hoping that we can have some really fun interaction. We can talk about examples, or if there was any questions, I allowed for extra time at the end. However, we can always be done early too. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to do a share screen, but while I'm doing that, who has taken their disc and would like to share what their personality type is? Anybody just shouted out?
You want to use mine?
Yeah, go ahead. Just tell us what it is. Oh, go ahead, Janice.
So I was gonna say, or maybe some people may not know how to read it. So
Okay, so if you don't know how to read it, so like there's a bunch of descriptions, but also there's that little scale off to the side that's like on every page. So that kind of gives you that little bit of a graph. And then you have your adaptive personality and the word's going to escape me. What is it? There's 2 different, Mason, tell me. Natural, thank you. Personality. So there's some differences there. Mine's pretty much the same across the board, but whoever would like to just jump in, unmute yourself, anyone in the class, go ahead.
Combination.
Yeah, everybody is, yeah. Everybody's a high one and then a secondary.
Lower on the T and then higher on all the other ones.
Okay, so what was your primary though?
Yeah. And C was close.
Okay, and honestly, I would have guessed that you were an S.
I thought so too. I thought I was gonna do that anyway, so.
Yeah, and that's okay. And we're all something different. Mine are actually strangely all over the 50% line. So I'm a whole bunch of personality, I guess. So everything is over the 50% line. Believe me when I say even the S is over that line, which is surprising, I'm sure, to some of you. However, my D and I are my 2 dominant. And I guess it's also depends on how you answer the question. So like, are you thinking business? Are you thinking home life? What is it that you're thinking? However, I've done the disc test bunch of different ways. I did the one that you guys took, and I've also done a big Tony Robbins one. By big, I mean it's like 2 to 3 hours long, and it gives you like this 120 page printout. And no matter every which way I've done it, it's always the same. It doesn't matter how I try to change my mindset with the questions, it still knows. So I think it's interesting how the questions are laid out and how that might have something to do with it. But Chad, go ahead, tell us what was yours.
Yeah, I'm a 88% I
Okay,
and a little less than 50% for D and a little over for the natural, a little over 60% for D.
okay, very good.
I think that my lowest one was C for some reason, and I only got 7% on that, which I thought was
Okay.
fair.
Okay, yeah. And we're gonna talk about what each of those means and what it means to know what your personality type is, but also then how can we figure out others in our life and in particular our clients to help us. Anybody else like to share what theirs is, or on Zoom, please just go ahead and unmute yourself. When I do a share screen, I can't see all your faces, so feel free to jump in.
I have mine.
Yeah,
On one of them, I'm a high S, the other one, I'm a high C. So natural and adaptive,
mm-hmm,
so, 74 S and then 68 C, and then the other one 70 S, but 81 C.
okay, well, so similar. Mace, would you close that door? Janice, what are you?
I am a DI. I used to be an SC. When I
Really?
first started, I was 5 years ago, I was a SC. And I
Interesting.
changed to a DI.
So do you think that's in the workplace or in your personal life or both?
I think it's both, but my S is pretty high too. It's just not higher than my D or my I because
Mhm.
S is like family, security, all of that. And so my S is a little bit higher too, which I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd be curious to know what my other living people are. Davita, Erica, Nicole.
Um,
Calling you
I
guys.
was I had to find mine again because I was like, I know I'm high in the S, but I couldn't remember what the others were. So in adapted, I am a high S and a high C. And then in natural, I am S and I.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Denise, you said that's interesting.
It is. My sister, so I know her personally.
Yes.
So it's interesting. Nicole, Erica,
I'm high I and S for adapted and natural. The other ones are like a little under 40,
Okay.
so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
What's the difference from adaptive and natural?
That's a great question. So just like it sounds, so your personality naturally is who you are naturally. Adaptive means obviously just like the word is. So like, how can I adapt to certain situations in my personality type, right? Hello, Kim, there's a stack here of papers you can grab. Anybody else on Zoom?
You know, I've taken quite a few of those assessments as well,
Mhm.
and I feel like over the years they've gradually changed. And I mean, we've never actually had a class on like what they meant or anything. They usually just done that for the workplace.
Yeah, there's a whole packet there, yeah.
Thought that it was pretty different. Seeing how they.
It's also different depending on the way the test is. This is a really short, the one I just sent out to everybody. It's a really short one. It takes like what, 20 minutes. There's a question and then you're putting things in order of which one. To me, that is, it's a little less deep because of that way. So when I've done ones where it's a big paragraph and then there's multiple choice answers and you're only picking one, it's a little bit different than putting things in order, I feel. So it just depends. Some people, it's the same every time. So like we also have something here at Keller Williams called a KPA, which is, there's a short version and a long version. And with that, you're really doing some crazy stuff. Like there's pictures of cubes and things that you're putting together, or you're trying to see which ones are the same. And it can tell I'm a D. I know because I skip a lot because I'm really impatient. So I'm like, oh no, I am not spending more than 10 seconds on this question, skip. So I think it's gauging your personality based on which questions you actually did answer versus which ones you didn't and what you got right. And then how long you spend, and if so, how mindful you are. So there's that high C. If you're okay spending 30 seconds on a question versus me not wanting to spend more than 2, it can really tell that I'm a D versus somebody who's more mindful that might be a C too. Well, awesome. Well, let's jump in and start talking about these. So I first wanted just to spend some time just discovering what each personality type is. And anyone on Zoom or in the room, please, I really want this to be an interactive conversation. So just interrupt me and raise your hand and just unmute yourself, jump right in. But then we're going to get to, I put together in my thinking and my experience with DISC, how I think we could relate to buyers and sellers based on each one of these personality types. So I thought we can go through kind of having a full understanding of them. And there's lots of fun examples, but so a couple of things I want to point out is this. Typically they say, so you have a first and then a second. And then, of course, you have the other 2, and some people rate very low, and some people like me are all over the 50%. But my 2 dominant are D and I. So typically when we look at this graph here, most people have a DC or a CS or an SC or a CD, and you kind of go to the one either in a square. Let's just put it that way. Most people's personalities do not cross this way. I don't know if you guys on the Zoom can see my cursor here. So we typically don't go DS or IC or CI or SD, right? It's usually this way in a square. It doesn't mean that people don't, but there's very, very few people in the population that would be a DS as their 2 primary or an SD. Why? Because those are conflicting. How could you be a high dominant D and then also be the opposite of that, which is the S, and vice versa? And then a C, who's a very detailed person, yet then very expressive, on that other end. Again, it doesn't mean that there's not, and I've known people who've taken it that are that, it's just less common, right? Did anyone that did their DISC end up being diagonally across versus around in that square that I was talking about? That means, do we have any SDs or DSs or ICs and CIs out there? Probably not. So occasionally that does happen. But we typically are, to the one next to us in the graph. So let's talk about Ds. So a D stands for the dominance. So this is a person who is, gets things done immediately, is very results driven, looks to take action, very in charge, not indecisive, can choose things quite easily, very motivated, very in an authority type position, doesn't like vulnerability, again, makes decisions very easily and then sticks to them. So a high D probably is the least personality that's going to have buyer's remorse, let's say, for anything. Has good self-confidence. However, this is where that natural and adaptive can come in. So if you're not naturally a D, but you're higher on the adaptive D, that could just be this. Life causes us to also have some personality traits, right? So that could be somebody who has said, you know what? I don't like being pushed around in my life. So now I'm going to force my personality to take a stance and I'm going to be in control and I'm not going to be indecisive. So I'm going to strive to be something more like that. And so I'm adapting towards that. Does that make sense? And so we can all do that and in different areas in our life too, right? So maybe you've been in relationships with friends or someone that you're dating and you feel like the past couple relationships you were a pushover and now you're making the decision, I'm not going to be anymore. And now I'm going to step outside of that. Go ahead.
Does it matter who you're around? Like you're different around
You are. So like
people?
you can very well be. So there are definitely people that they are way different at work than they are at home, right? And that just depends on how flexible you are with your personality, how fluid you are. So like I'm a D, Mason could tell you, at home, and I'm a D at work, and I just am. So what does it, I'm just as strong-headed in my personal life as I am in my business life. I don't have a hard time making decisions. I know what I want. I know the path to how to get there, and I want to. So I'm goal driven that way. I'm a maniac in my house with keeping it clean. So sometimes I think, am I a high C? Well, I'm detailed in that way, right? However, I think it's more leaning towards the D because I have to be in control of those things. So a D is somebody who wants to be in control of their own life, not necessarily spouting orders to others always, but just wants to be, have that kind of control. There was a graph that said if we related the disc to Star Wars, Darth Vader would be a D, right? And then it would be Han Solo would be the I, the guy that walks in, is happy, wants to be everybody's friend. And then the C would be R2D2 and the S would be C3PO. So if you know Star Wars, like if you can just imagine those things. So like I think about that when I'm trying to gauge people's personalities. And like the nervous person who is uncertain is going to be more the S versus the detailed person who is like an engineer is going to be the C. So also with the D, so I would say this, the limitations for a D then is lack of concern for others, which is kind of funny. That's why you then get balanced out by your second personality type, impatient, and can be at times insensitive. I'll also caution you this when we talk about how to adapt this to your buyers and sellers. A D is also somebody that you might think, depending on your personality type. So if you're a D, you're going to understand the other Ds, right? If you're an S, you could think that a D doesn't like you, but it doesn't mean they don't like you. It's just their personality type. So like you might say, oh, wow, I'm surprised that buyer called me back. I thought they didn't like me. Well, that was just because their personality type doesn't necessarily show that, not because they're uncomfortable showing they like people, because it just isn't important in that moment. In business, a D isn't trying to be your friend. They are trying to just get the work done, right? And we'll talk more about that when we get to that section. Questions about Ds? Any other examples or anybody like to shout out there if they're a high D and how that they can relate to that?
Actually, when you were asking people if they were like a DI or an IS or something, I didn't even look at it until after just now, but I am a ID and then an IS.
Okay.
So I'm an ID naturally and a IS adaptively.
Interesting. Okay.
But I think that's because I'm very adaptive with my environment.
That's true. And I can see the I for sure, because when I first met you, you were very chatty and you're very comfortable, as high I's tend to be. So awesome.
And I've definitely pushed for that.
Yeah.
My whole life.
Yeah, I love it. So that leads me into talking about the I's. So let's talk about the I, which stands for then influence. So priorities for an I would be expressing enthusiasm. So that's that person, like, you know, when they walk in the room, they want to know everybody, they want attention, they like to talk to people and learn new things. They also like to take action, but like to collaborate with other people. Whereas the D might want to stand alone on some things. They like to be around other people, but they already know what they're going to do, and they might not take other people's opinions as serious if they don't agree with them. Motivated by social recognition, group activities, friendly relationships. So again, that's that client that is looking to choose somebody who they also feel could be their friend. So we have to be careful with the eyes that it's what's important to them is to be friendly. Their fears are social rejection, disapproval, loss of influence, and being ignored. So a high I can get, like you can see in an environment that they're really impatiently waiting to get to talk. So like you could be someplace in like we can always see the eyes in class environments. We'll use, for example, our two TLs, Jill and Mark, are both high eyes. Absolutely high eyes. They're perfectly comfortable getting up in front of the room. Matter of fact, the I part of me is when I'm in a class and no one's answering a question, I feel like there's this big arrow pointing at me and I need to put the instructor out of their misery and just answer. That's not my D. I assure you that's my I coming out. So just feels comfortable, wants to talk, likes to be heard, and likes that attention. Limitations, or you will notice charm, enthusiasm, definitely always being optimistic and talkative. Limitations would be the impulsiveness. I can also tell you that my experience, so this is where my D weighs in. I am not with the limitations with the eyes. So like a lot of eyes have issues with getting things done. So that's where, although we like agents to be high on the eye, because that means they're comfortable around people and they're talkative. However, there's a little bit of a problem with the really high eyes having follow through. So on action and actually remembering to do the things that they say they're going to do. Also very impulsive and a bit disorganized too. Anybody can share a story about their self or about someone that they know in their life that's a high I, that might be challenging or funny that you'd like to add about yourself or someone else that you know?
I think some of that's fair, but then I think that other qualities.
Well, you balance, right? Like most people aren't 100% one thing. There's always at least a secondary. So a lot of high I's could have no S and probably no C, but also have some of that D. And then the D is going to then give you a balance on some of those things. But I could think of 3 high I's right now that those limitations 100% describe them. Oh yeah, I'll get that to you later today. And not only do you not get it later today, they forget to ever get it to you. Where the D is like, where's it at? Where's it at? Where's it at? And well, hey, listen, what's great is that you can recognize that, right?
Well, I hate it, because I also have the D, I'm like D and I.
Okay.
I feel like my I fuzzes out the D.
Yeah, sometimes it's like a challenge, like a boxing match, and it might overtake. Also then again, to me, kind of challenging and the opposite is impulsiveness too. So whereas a D might, it's not the word impulsive, but can make decisions quickly. It's just because they thought it through already and they already knew. Whereas impulsive could be just snap decisions that then they later regret. No one thinks of the word impulsive as a positive thing. Usually that impulsive decision means it comes with a little bit of regret later too. Or maybe you don't even realize that you did it, just like you didn't remember to give someone something that you promised. So what other challenges or questions or anyone that could relate to with an I that you'd like to share? And you guys on Zoom are not off the hook, so please feel free to unmute yourself.
I would say this. I definitely notice sometimes when my I takes over my D. Because I mean, there's no, like, I like people. My sister attest to this. I'm like a social butterfly, and sometimes um my impulsiveness will show and overtake my D. And so I'll make like a decision without thinking. And when I go see clients who who are also an I don't know that we mesh well because two high I's, I don't know that we're really getting to the meat of it because we're in the fields of being in relationship. So you have to really take account to who you're sitting across from to know what they are so that you can mirror a little bit, but not totally go off the rails, if that makes sense.
So like what I think I'm hearing you say, which I've fallen into this too, if you like the person, let's start with that.
Mhm.
And you could be standing in the driveway after a showing with another high I, and 45 minutes have gone by and the homeowners come home and you're still there chit chatting.
Yep.
So two eyes on a listing appointment may never get to the paperwork.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or your listing appointment goes from an hour to like 3
Yes,
hours.
that's
And you're
right.
like, oh my gosh, I need to go home and, pick up kids from school, and you just totally lose track of time. So you have to be careful with that if you're a high I.
And a listing appointment, in my opinion, should be no more than an hour and a half, including getting doc signed. Now, there's nothing wrong with if it's shorter or longer, but that's like the average listing appointment in total with Tor, going over marketing, discussing things about what they want and need, and doing paperwork. If we're not doing paperwork, I feel like it should be about an hour. But it also depends on, how do I know this person? Do I know them personally? And then how big is the house? So like, let's not take that into account. Like, obviously, if the house is 10,000 square feet, it's gonna take a little bit longer, right? But it should not be 3 hours. And I have been sucked into 3 hour listing appointments before. And I'm like, ugh, what just happened? And we haven't even had a sip of water. We've been talking so much. Like definitely. So thank you for bringing that up. So you have to know your type and what you'll get sucked into as well.
Correct.
I have a question. I was
Yeah.
having technical difficulties. So where do I find, so are the results of everything at the bottom corner? Is that how we find out what we are?
There's a scale there on every page. Yeah.
Right.
It's
Oh,
like,
okay.
yep, color
Okay.
coded. Yep.
What is
Okay.
yours, Nicole? I'm curious.
I am a D and a C.
I can definitely see the C for sure because
can
you are
too.
very detailed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can too. Which one is higher?
The D.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
That
here's what I'm going to say then. Let your D take the lead, because I feel like sometimes with different personalities. So Nicole likes to be very detailed and organized, which is great. But then there's a challenge with then the finishing, right? And like pulling the trigger and getting to that point. And so let your D take over and say to your C, okay, it's good enough. Let's move forward with that thing, whether it's a mailing or it's a post or that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, because the C is definitely like perfection. They want it to be perfect before they do it.
Yes.
And that is definitely you, Nicole.
It is. Let's not talk about yesterday, Janice.
We're not, you did it. We're past
I
that.
did
We're
it.
past that.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you, guys. All right, so let's talk about the C. So the C priorities are ensuring accuracy. This is like somebody that they balance their checkbooks. That's to the penny. And if they're missing 3 cents, they go digging to see where the mistake was made. Those of you who do that are laughing because you know that it's you. It's definitely not me. Even when we used to have a checkbook and keep track, which I definitely don't, I never did change. I just always rounded down, so that therefore, if I added up 65 cents times however many, I was always ahead in my checkbook, right? That was back in the day before we had just online banking and we can always just check our balance. So like, that's the D in me, because I'm like, listen, as long as I'm ahead, I'm ahead. I don't care about the detail of every penny. So those of you who know what I mean, know what I mean. They're maintaining stability, has to have everything go a certain kind of a way. This is somebody who also, if you change the schedule, they are gonna have a struggle with that. They like to do things a certain way. Oftentimes, take no offense, C's out there, oftentimes they're the OCD people. They like things to be lined up a certain kind of a way. They like things to go how they thought was going to go. If you said you were going to make this for dinner and you're married to a high C, they might say, what the heck just happened? What do you mean we're going out to dinner? I thought you were cooking, and has a harder time going with the flow. Likes things, it makes them feel safe, that steadiness, right? They are motivated by opportunities to use that expertise and knowledge. And so that is definitely your spreadsheet person. And they love graphs, and they love spreadsheets, and they love statistics. So again, when we talk about this here in a little bit, I'm going to show you how, when you go on appointments with them, what you need to be prepared to bring and what they're expecting. They definitely fear criticism because they spend a lot of time on that thing. They spend a lot of time in detail creating that spreadsheet or building that thing. They tend to be the engineers out there. They tend to be those type of personalities that are very much so like your architects and people like that can really focus on detail, whereas a high I is not paying attention to detail. And good Lord, we don't want them being our architects, right? They would be talking about being our neighbor, not how to put the house together properly. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's everyone's just different in how we are. They're very precise. They love to analyze, very skeptical, and they could be reserved and quiet at times. It does not mean that they're shy. It just means that they like to keep their personality inside, and maybe then, depending on who they're around, they will let it out. They will oftentimes be very afraid of high I's. It's too much for them. You're talking too loud, you're talking too fast. So you need to be able to, especially, again, if you're an I, you want to gauge those C's right away. You will most definitely scare them away with too much chatter. So knowing that's going to really help you in your life too, by the way. Limitations, they're overly critical of their self in particular and others. They overanalyze. This is definitely someone who, when you go to the closing, don't go to your high C buyer's closings. You will be there for 2 hours. Or you need to warn the title person, hey, this buyer's a high C, so you're going to need to really take control of this appointment, because they're going to want to read everything. And then they're going to question things that, by the way, can't be changed on the paperwork. So as long as they know that ahead of time, so that might be someone, the way you counsel them is, hey guys, here's what to expect from the closing. It should be 45 minutes long. There's some documents in here that are legal documents that absolutely are not renegotiable or can be changed. I've actually been in a closing with a high C, and he wanted to change the verbiage on the mortgage that gets recorded at the county recorder's office. That can't be changed. It is what it is. He didn't like a word. And so you're like, ugh. So I tend to struggle a little bit with that piece of C's. Now I can appreciate the C's order and organization and cleanliness, because my D is similar in that way. I don't understand the overanalyzing. They cannot make fast decisions because they really need to think about it. So when I go on a listing appointment with a C, I'm probably going to send them all the paperwork days before. So this way they're ready with their questions when I get there. Otherwise, you could be sucked into a really long appointment. When you go to a high C's house, their closet's going to be color coded and in order. It's absolutely not gonna be a pile of clothes on the bed like perhaps a high I would have, you know, so.
With another listing, he had a spreadsheet for me. Like, I couldn't even
Yeah.
process it. It was so much stuff. It's like, he's like,
Yeah.
look what I did for you. And his wife was, he spent hours on that. I'm like, oh my God.
And like, what are you gonna do with it?
Nothing.
I've had buyers seize, take their home inspection report, so I caution you this too. A high C will take, this one in particular, took their home inspection report and put it on a spreadsheet and outlined it and wanted every single thing that was even mentioned in the home inspection report done by the seller. So I had to say, in the nicest way possible, let's come down to planet Earth, my exact words. Do you not want the house anymore? Because what I'm hearing you say is you really want to antagonize the seller. That is not the purpose of the home inspection. And we talked about this as in our expectations conversation prior to the home inspection. So you will get a mutual release back if we send this to the seller. Like, that crazy time. And that was in a buyer's market. So unlike a seller's market who would really like laugh you out the door, even in a buyer's market, that's just craziness. But that's the kind of things you're going to experience, you know, with your high Cs. Let's jump into the S's. So steadiness. So this is someone that you can absolutely always count on. Priorities are giving support. So that's your supportive friend who's always going to be there when you need them. They're probably going to bring you chicken soup when you're sick. Someone like me, I would love to do that. It just never is going to happen. I know it. I know it's my limitation, but my heart's there. I'm thinking that I'd like to bring you soup. I just never will get to it. Right? Maintaining stability is so very important to them and enjoying collaboration. So they like being around other people, but tend to be more reserved. They can be mistaken for also sort of being shy. It's really just that they're more reserved and not necessarily shy. Let's look at the definition of someone who's shy. There's a fear connotation behind shy, right? That's not necessarily the case here, but it is that they appear that way to others. Motivated by stable environments, sincere appreciation. They want compliments, not in the way that eyes want compliments, but in the kind of sincere way. They want to know that they can trust you. They expect that and want to lean on others. Also, I think S's, they have a harder understanding of some of the other personality types like a D. That's the person who's going to be most fearful as, oh gosh, they didn't like me kind of a thing. Fears of loss of stability, change, loss of harmony. There it is again, offending others. They don't want to offend others. So this is going to be your agreeable person. So my personality is my hardest personality type to gauge is an S. I think that I don't necessarily always understand because they are agreeable. So think about those people in your life, no matter what you say, they're like, oh yeah, we're really okay with that. But I don't know how true that is or sincere, other than they're just the people pleaser, right? You'll notice that they are very patient, so they can be very mindful and take a lot of time. So this is someone who's going to say, I cannot make a decision right now on a Saturday morning on this house, even though it's everything I've been looking for. You'll hear them say, but it was the only house we looked at. So me as a D, I'm going to say, I didn't care about the other houses. I'm here because this is the only one I liked. So I'm okay not looking at all the other houses because I wouldn't have wasted my time looking if I knew I did. I tried on one wedding dress. I looked at a bunch, and the only lucky one that got pulled off the rack was the only one I tried on and the one I bought. I'm not wasting my time looking in the mirror at 25 different examples. So an S is going to be that person that says, although I tried on 25, I think we need to go to 5 other stores and try on 20 more because I want to make sure that I've made the right decision because I know I'm going to second guess myself and I have to be sure. That's also someone that will tell you, I need to sleep on my decision. So like my reply to that, if it's someone in my life and not a client, is what's gonna change? How does waking up tomorrow going to change whether you like it or you don't? But that's just some people's comfort level, right?
And things that with people in your life, what do you do with client?
I'm so impatient about it, but I can't, I mean, I have to let them know that that's okay, because then they're not gonna work with me, right? So it's okay that you wanna think about, I can appreciate that that's how you are. Let me tell you the consequences to that. You could, as long as you're okay with, lose the property. So sleeping on it in the hot market we're in, it doesn't necessarily fly right now. Right? But you know, when we're in a buyer's market where there's 40 houses, then we got plenty of time. That's also someone who will say, I want to bring my parents back, or I need to go back for a second showing at the end of next week, or I just need to go home and discuss it. Like that's definitely more of a quality of a C and an S for sure. So of course, we have to work with all people. So it's just a matter of how am I going to script myself into a situation where I can still sound like I'm okay about it, because it's not my decision, but have them understand the options. So I always say, listen, guys, I don't make your decisions. I'm an option provider. I can totally appreciate that you want to be 100% certain, and I don't want you to have buyer's remorse, but there's multiple offers on this house. We can't take time, it'll be gone. And if you're okay with that, then we'll do that. That's how I present it, you know. I also do a lot of apologizing up front for my personality and say, listen, do I have your permission to tell you in a direct way what might be best for you and this situation based on what you told me? So again, if someone says, I don't have to sell, I'm in no hurry to buy, that's okay then. But if you told me your house sold and you've got to be out May 10th, we've got a whole different scenario here. And Amanda, do I have your permission as my client to tell you what I think is the best option based on the information you gave me? And then you can decide what you want to do. Because after all, you're paying me for my services. It's not just a simple, here's the information, you all decide. And you do decide in a way, but you've employed me sort of to work on your behalf to help guide you through that process. Make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions or examples about S's? Any S's out there that would say I can relate to that? I agree, I don't agree.
So I was a high S in adapted and natural, but
Mhm.
after going over the explanations, I see why Janice was like, that's interesting, because I feel like I fit C better. So I
Okay.
thought that was kind of interesting how it played out in the results.
Nice. Yeah, and so again, I think it's also because you have your high in one and then there's the secondary. Because a lot of people say the same for me, like they're like, really, you're an I think you're all D, but there is other side to me depending on the setting. And also who I'm around too. And sometimes we're more mindful of our personality and then we're not. So that makes a difference as well. Anybody else? Chad, I know you were starting to say something.
I was gonna say, I think it's weird, like you were saying with the market right now.
Mhm.
I've been to quite a few showings where all of the houses are going for like 20 and 30,000 over asking. And then I've also been to the exact opposite where you think that the house is gonna go for more
Yeah.
and nobody is putting even close to offer on it.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things about that. It's in regards to pricing. It depends on location. It depends on the price range for that location and how many buyers are out there for that. And it also depends on if you're overpriced. You cannot be, buyers are willing to pay $50,000 to beat somebody else out because everybody's so competitive, but they won't just do that if the price is too high to begin with. So that's why.
So for an example, a house in my neighborhood listed at 350, 120 days ago yesterday.
Whoa,
And it got under contract yesterday for 269.
whoa.
Yeah, that's a big difference. And my house is literally twice the size. And I'm like, if it goes for 350, I'm selling in March.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I will say this too, condition takes a huge factor right now. It is square footage and features, but condition. Buyers don't want to do a lot of work. They're willing just to pay more.
I noticed that they're updated, they go on quicker.
Way quicker. I have a struggle listing right now that's only been on the market for a few days, but they think it's updated. This is being recorded. They think it's updated. It's not. It's updated from 1998, but no wallpaper or anything like that, but it's just dark. And that's just not gonna fly, but it is what it is. And I would say same thing. Yeah, they've taken care of it. And they even said that. I don't understand. We've taken really good care. I accidentally, as Mason said, that when we were talking price, out of my mouth came $100,000 less than that they just said to me what they wanted to list for. And then I said, so am I hearing you say, and I said $100,000 less. I didn't even realize that I said it. And they're staring at me and he's like, I think you meant 474.9. I'm like, oh, did I say 374.9? I'm so sorry. And that just slipped out because that's really what I think, but nonetheless, it is what it is. I guess it's really what I think, right? What's that?
Oh, I was just asking you, when you went over the comps, then were they really more in that range, what you said?
So that's a great question. So what I did, because I already knew they were feeling on the 5-ish side, I brought comparables in the CMA for their house. It is what it is. And then I brought comps between 400,000 and 500,000 to show them how between that price range, how are these houses? Like, look at these close to $500,000 houses and see how yours isn't like those. They sat there nicely. I'm gonna say they're both S's. Clearly, I misgauged them. They were a different personality. These are my 8-year people you guys have talked about before. It took me 8 years to find a house. They are not D's. They took 8 years to find a house. 8, I'm not joking. Not months. You heard right, years. And I was at a whole nother real estate company when I met them. And yeah, so they're definitely S's, and that's why they sat there staring at me, nodding and smiling and being agreeable. However, they didn't let the fact, like, they're not going to be a pushover. They ignored they listened patiently through all of it and then looked at each other and said, yeah, we thought about this. Completely ignored what I said, all my logic about what they should do. And, it is what it is. So yeah, so we just roll with it, I guess. I'm not going to say no, but all right. So then there's in the Google Drive, by the way, we have a whole folder of good information on disc. But I wanted to put together what I thought would be helpful when you're trying to figure out when you're working with a DISC as buyers and sellers. So this form, and for anyone who wants to print this later, it is in a folder called DISC in the Google Drive training folder. So again, just quickly, your D is dominance, result-driven, direct, competitive. Your I is an influencer, enthusiastic, friendly, and optimistic. You can tend to misgauge your iBuyer because they're so excited about the house, like they're already placing their furniture. Do not mistake that means they're going to make an offer. We can tend to get excited along with them, and then they realize later, oh, I do that in every house I go to, kind of a thing. They can see their self anywhere. An S, steady, sincere, patient, and modest. A C, compliant, accurate, cautious, and competitive as well. All right. So knowing your D is going to definitely help you be able to modify. So let's talk about that. I cannot go into some appointments being all high D. It's going to work with some and not with others. Even when I'm on an appointment with another D, I have to let them be in charge. I can't be in charge, right? Because that's going to be combative. So knowing where you're at with that. And again, please, guys, if you have an example of a situation, jump on in there or questions. All right. So as the D personality working with sellers, definitely come on time, but not early. So I'm sure those of you who've had appointments with me notice that I am on the dot on time, but rarely ever late. I like on time, but I'm probably not gonna come 10 minutes early. So being that I know that about myself, because I'm doing things until it's time to go, but I also am very cautious of not being late. Um, with a listing appointment or even a buyer appointment, really, what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposely make myself go and just park around the corner and be there in the neighborhood, whether it's the buyer appointment or a seller appointment. And then, check my emails and do all the things from my car and then drive to the house exactly on time. I would never want to intrude on somebody before they think I'm going to be there. In particular, a D. Be very prepared. They're going to decide to work with you, not because you're the friendliest person. They want you to be competent. So some of you may have a challenge with this if you don't have a lot of D in you too, because that's going to make you more driven for that. It's not that you're trying to change your type to becoming a D, but living up to the D's expectations. So let's use the scenario of at a restaurant. If I'm at a restaurant, I used to be a waitress, so I don't mean this to sound like a jerk. I don't want to be friends with my waitress. I just don't. I want them to be available when something's needed. I'm never going to be crazy and snap my fingers or be rude, but I want them to be there when I need a refill. I don't want to ask for, please don't bring me a glass of iced tea with melted ice. Like I could lose my mind every time. As they carried it over and it melted, I ordered an iced tea because I didn't want a hot tea. So bring me a glass of ice. As a D, that's something that a waitress that's a D would know. I can always tell the D waitresses. If they're a high I, they don't notice that. And they want to be our friend. So they're interrupting constantly. They might even sit down at the table with us and they can understand that some people like that. And some people may give them a tip better because they wanted that kind of experience. Others of us are like, what is happening right now? I can assure you that's what I'm thinking. I do have friends, however, that I go to dinner with, and they're like, come on, join us. And they can sit there spending 25 minutes talking to the waitress. Well, I'm like, what again is happening right now? Exactly. Yes. Spending time on sending them information before you go is also important. However, they may only look at it briefly. So we're going to talk about how those things compare as we go down the line to each personality type. It makes them feel like even if they don't look at it, even if I email them my whole marketing packet and they never look at it, the fact that they saw it come through makes them feel like you're organized and competent. It doesn't matter that they didn't look at it. It only matters that shows that you're a professional. I would say a D also in particular, do not go in workout clothes. Do not try to make them feel comfortable by looking like, don't mirror them in the sense of depending on their price point. Not D's aren't all in $500,000 houses. They could be in a $90,000 house, right? Don't do this. And I hear people say this all the time and it blows my mind. When we say mirror your client, we mean to try to, follow their posture, make them feel comfortable that way. That doesn't mean this. I'm going to dress down because they came from work. Do not. It takes away your professionalism. And in particular with the D, they expect to see you be very professional. Get to the point quickly. Absolutely get to the point quickly. If you're lingering on, they may cut you off. So in particular, in a listing appointment, well, even on both, get to the point very quickly when you're talking. Let them talk and let them ask questions. Be definitely prepared to answer their questions. However, we can always all be in situations where we're stuck. Write stuff down. A high D wants to know that you're actually hearing them and that you're writing it down. Whereas a high I, they may not even notice that you're writing it down. So definitely take notes, because if you don't, they will be thinking, how are you going to remember this? Because they think that they're the mental superior person over here. And so if they don't think you're taking notes, They're gonna be asking you questions like, do you have a photogenic memory or something? How are you remembering this? And that's important to them. Don't necessarily make recommendations on a listing appointment with a D unless they asked you to do so. So here's something that I say when we sit down in a listing appointment. Tell me a little bit about your expectations for today's appointment. As we walk through, if you have questions about things you should change or things you should repair, please shout that out and we can have a discussion around that. A D might say, yeah, no, the house is in perfectly good condition and we're doing nothing. Matter of fact, you better tell the buyer that this is as is and we're going to do nothing, because they should appreciate all the things I've already done to the house. So they're most definitely going to be in charge. It doesn't mean be a pushover. They don't want and respect definitely someone who's a pushover, but being present and being professional and hearing them out. They don't like fluff or necessarily friendliness. This is a business transaction. Yes, we're in a relationship business, so that doesn't take away that there's a relationship to be had, but they aren't trying to necessarily find people to be friends with. They don't care about the, oh my God, this is so amazing. They will not trust that you're telling the truth when you're over fluffing it. It doesn't mean that you can't appreciate the things that they've done and say so, but don't do it in an overly aggressive, fluffy way. Price, you can lead them a path, but they probably already have an idea of what they want for the house. I can also tell you this, when I'm on a listing appointment with a D and I can overcome obstacles with them, they become my biggest fans. So a high D will be your biggest person to give you referrals because they love being around other competent people. And if they think a price that's different and you can prove to them why it will in the end benefit them, they may listen to you and make that change, right? But you have to show them why it might benefit them to be able to bend, in particular on price. Let's see. Any questions on that? I'm just kind of trucking along. Proof like that, again, proof of those comps would be important. So like, let's go back to my listing appointment scenario. If they were Ds, they would have seen the evidence and appreciated it versus not listening. Set out a plan. They like to have a game plan. If you do overprice it, then a plan for price reductions, and that you have a system and you're running a business and it's professional. Let's see. They also probably know before you get there that they wanted to work with you because they weren't going to waste their time interviewing 25 different agents. They looked you up, they got high recommendations. That's why you're sitting there. A D also might be that family member of yours who your feelings are hurt that they didn't work with you, but it might just be because they didn't like your personality type. They like you as a family member, but they didn't trust that you could do the job. Like if I'm as a D myself, if I needed an attorney for something and I had a brother-in-law that was an attorney, but I didn't really have faith in his personality, I probably wouldn't want to work with him. So again, don't have your feelings be too hurt, because it could just be their personality type and not something that they thought about you in particular. Again, coming prepared with documents already filled out, it would be also important. They want that hour and a half appointment to be an hour. They'll appreciate that we got done. And I don't mean rush, not rush. Be mindful of time, but don't linger on. That's not someone who wants to stay and chit chat after the appointment either. When you're done, it's time to go and then talk about your next conversation that you're going to have later. Being responsive very quickly. So this is someone that's going to text you and they don't care that you have a life. They expect a reply. However, we teach people how to teach us. So if you're someone who says, I'm not replying at 11 o'clock at night, don't do it. Because here's what happens. If someone's going to complain about you later, it's going to be someone because every time you responded at 11 o'clock at night. And then this one time when you didn't, their expectation was on, on that topic here. And then when you one time didn't, then they're going to complain. So set that expectation with them and then they will honor it. So if you say, let's talk about communication, what do you prefer? Do you like text? Do you like calls? I will tell you, D's probably like text because it's fast. So remember, impatience, right? So they want to cut to the chase relatively quickly. Try to find out their why, and that way you can then use that later. Back to that scenario we were talking about, Amanda. So you said that you sold your house and you had to be out by mid-May. So now we have to make a decision quickly. So reminding them of that why. Working with buyers with AD, similar things, but showing your value, sending them homes, but also this, I would definitely follow up immediately. They don't want to feel like this is what they'll say. I don't even know what my agent did. They set me up at an auto search. They didn't even find the house. Interesting that people say that because we still send you information. So they want to know that you know what they got. So you set them up in an auto search and then you immediately follow up, probably with a text message, and say, hey, I saw those 5 properties. The one on blah, blah, blah street looks like it really fits your criteria. Now they know that you are on top of things and that you actually heard what they said and what they wanted and you followed up accordingly. And then the whole, do you want to see it on Saturday? Point blank question. Don't be wishy-washy. You also have to say, do you want to make an offer? Chances are, though, the D is going to tell you before you have to ask that question. Don't forget to ask for the sale sometimes. Like sometimes buyers are like, yeah, I would have made an offer, but my agent never really asked. And it's always so strange to me. Again, a D, you're not going to probably have that problem, but an S might be waiting to be asked. Be available when they want you to. And if you cannot, have somebody else that can. They will not wait. If they have found the house that they love, they will cheat on you. They will cheat on you. And it's not because of loyalty reasons. It's because of impatience again. I want what I want, and I really want to work with my agent, but gosh, if they can't do it, I'll find someone who can. So be aware, again, that's not anything against you. It's just you have to understand their personality type. And for them, it's not a loyalty thing. It's more of a, well, I laid out my expectations and I wanted this and they said they'd be available and now they're not. But it's okay in this. We have all of us have each other. If you can't, then someone can. Don't go away for the weekend without having somebody here be available to help you out. And I know we all do a really good job of doing that for each other. They also are probably not going to be the buyer who's just going to settle. They're not going to say, well, I like this enough. They have their bullet points of what they want, and they probably want most of them. They're not going to probably bend too much when that comes up. They can handle a little conflict as long as you lead the way during the transaction. They want to see the end point and the benefit for them. They might also be, and I have found this, I've experienced, and I forget this myself being a D. Some Ds can be really excited inside, even though they aren't showing it to you. I've had buyers where they've never smiled until the closing, and I'm like, oh, so you do smile. It doesn't mean that they weren't excited inside. They also felt like they didn't have a personal relationship with you and that was just a business transaction. So don't mistake that they're not excited. We can tend to look at the excitement of a high I and assume that they love the house, and just the opposite with the D. It's like, really? You want to make an offer? Because you seem like you didn't like the house at all, right? Again, they just had a harder time or just didn't want to express it. So I don't know that it's a hard time expressing their emotions. It's more of a, I decide when I'm going to and who I'm going to share that with. So don't mistake their flat or more stoic personality as not actually loving it, right? Or liking you for that matter. We can tend to mistake that with that too. They also don't give lots of good compliments. So they aren't going to say necessarily, you did such a great job. Oh my gosh, you made my experience amazing. It doesn't mean that they don't say that. They're going to be the one who's probably going to write the really legitimate review about you versus telling you constantly how great you are. Questions about D and relevance to buyers and sellers?
Do you get along with?
Yeah. Sometimes depends on the circumstance. So like there could be a battle like, I would say this. A husband and wife are probably not gonna be 2Ds. There could be who's in charge? We can't have too many chiefs in the kitchen, right? So like, you definitely need to know that order. You can struggle. You tend to also have a spouse of a D who's not a D, try to be a D. So like my husband, who's absolutely the opposite personality of me, because he's a male, he wants to be the D, but he's not. So like, it is what it is, right? So we go through life with our challenges that way. In any case, I had a guy years ago when I was teaching this class, and he got his results and he looked so disappointed. And I said, you know, what's up? And he's like, I'm so disappointed about my personality type. I don't want to be an SC. And I was like, why not? And he's like, it feels like I should be a D. And but you're not, you know, it is what it is. Like, you don't, not everybody who's in a power situation is necessarily going to be a D. There's no better, by the way, I think D is the least, population or Ds. They're the smallest amount of our population are also Ds. So most people are other things, right? But yeah, 2Ds could, as long as they're aligned, right? If we're both in agreement about this thing, then they can absolutely see that. I think for me as a high D, I can appreciate the friends I have in my life that are also high Ds, as long as they're not combative with me about silly things. So debating the things as well, to me, that way. What else? What other questions or thoughts about the Ds? Any time that in your career you can experience, or situations that you feel could be challenging for you with Ds?
I always try to gauge their personality from the moment that I meet them.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they have an overpowering personality, I aim to either make them laugh, make them smile in the least bit, or compare something with me.
Yeah.
And that's what creates a bond for me with them.
Yeah, and if you feel like that has worked, then follow that path, right? For sure. All right, let's jump into I. So I is working with sellers. Always come on time, as we always will, but fully expect they'll be late. I can give you 25 examples. I mean, literally, I pulled up the driveway of a high I, and she was mowing the grass with soaking wet hair. And so I already knew, oh boy, we're an I. There's no way that a D would be doing that, right? And so like, they got home from work, got a shower to be ready, and was outside mowing the grass, and then just left the riding mower just sitting in the middle of the lawn. We got in the house. Like, my D, not C, I'd be hyperventilating to leave my lawnmower in the middle of the yard. Like, I promise you this, I'm that girl who, when I'm doing yard work and we run out of time and I'm not done, get out the floodlights. We're not stopping until this is done. That's definitely not going to be your high I. They're okay putting it later. But so understand they're probably going to be running late and doing a million things. And then they're friendly. They're your friendliest group of people. They're very expressive and friendly and welcoming. They probably want to offer you food and drinks, so you should accept them, as long as you feel safe. And sometimes I don't. I mean, I'm not in regards to that, in regards to, oh boy, what is this that you're giving me to drink or eat? Sometimes I've been at someone's house and I'm like, what is this thing that is so dry and hard, and now I can't speak? And I'm washing it down with something that seems like lemonade, but I'm not sure if it actually is. So that has happened. But at least accept it, even though you might just, like when you were a kid, push it around a little bit on your plate so it looks like you ate it. The eyes might often want to sit in the living room or back on the back porch instead of at the kitchen table. There is some point where you have to take charge of oh gosh, what we're going to do would feel more comfortable at the kitchen table. Even if the high I has a lot of stuff on their kitchen table that needs to be removed. I'm okay sliding it over and we'll take this little corner. In any case, act like it's okay that they're not on time too, because they also want your approval. Don't act annoyed that they're not ready. Oh, it's fine. Take your time. I'll just come over here and wait. Things are not likely to necessarily be ready either. Now, this doesn't, please don't imply that I's are messy people. That's not what I necessarily mean, but they're going to be more likely than some of the other personality types to not have things in order that way, or to the level of like some people's a D's expectations. Again, you'll send them information before because you always do, but they will absolutely not know that you did, because that's the person when you look over at their cell phone and their email says 30,000 that they've not read. My eye starts twitching. I can't even handle that. Because they haven't even checked their emails. That's okay. That's just who they are. They also want to be your friend, so don't lose sight of that. They want to know your value and what you're going to do to help them, but they also want to choose someone that they like. It's really important to them to like you. So you also want to tell them that their house is great. They want to hear those kinds of compliments. If you left there and you were all just business-like, they may not work with you because you didn't give them the vibe that you were friendly and that you liked them necessarily and that they liked you. They love the chit chat time. So you're going to have to allow for enough time to get to know each other and have that chit chat. Because they'll interject it the whole way through the house. They're going to tell you stories in every room. Remember, if they're selling their house, it's also probably a D is more of it's a business transaction kind of feeling, whereas an I is this is really personal. And we experienced this Christmas in this room and this thing happened and my kids this room. Like that's also a trait of a S. So being mindful of that and letting them share those experiences with you is really important. They want to talk. Don't overtalk them. So again, that's where those two I's come together. They want to know that you're interested in what they say, but they want to probably tell the stories. It's not a great idea to think that you're connecting because then you share your story with them, because they're already thinking about what they want to say next, and they are caring people, but not like an S in the way that they really are like, tell me more. They're like, shut the hell up so I can tell my story, is what they're thinking very fast. They want to have you know about them, and you're not in a situation where they really care. I've had that happen many times where I thought I was being empathetic by sharing my story to connect, but they didn't really care. And how I know is they were really quickly ready to cut the corner and change the subject. Very short attention spans, so you've got to keep that presentation brief. So cut to the chase, give them the information. They're probably going to jump right in and make a decision and list with you because they liked you. So you can come ready for that as well. I really would have to force myself to have the client watch and listen to all the paperwork because they probably are not paying attention. This is someone who's fiddling with their dog under the table instead of watching and talking to you about what they're about to sign too. So making sure that they hear you, because later I can already foresee the problems. Oh gosh, I didn't realize this was a 3-month contract because they weren't paying attention. So making sure that you're on top of that. Working with the eyes as buyers, sending them lots of choices, understanding what they're looking for is important because they're going to look on Zillow. They're going to look on everybody in town's, website. They're going to think that all these properties are coming from different sources and not that the MLS is sending them everything. They're not going to understand why Zillow might still have 25 houses on their site that have sold 3 years ago. They're all over the place. That's your person who's clicking on pictures at 11 o'clock at night on Facebook because it was a pretty house. I can assure you a D isn't going to do that. So when you get a lead from Google or from Facebook, it's more likely going to be that high I because they're just, oh, that's pretty, and they're going to click. So knowing that, but sending them lots of information, but toning it to the point of you have to be really careful. They'll want to see everything and they want it to be fun. It's a fun time. They may even bring friends and other people and they want to make a day of it and it wants to be fun. So you have to keep it light and fun, but you also have to stay in control and try to keep it moving. Also, I would adjust their search. If they'll want to see houses and not pay attention to the fact that it says 900 square feet when they tell you they have to have big bedrooms. So adjust their criteria. Also, shut off their searches when they have found a house they're making an offer on. Don't forget that. We should do that with everybody, but in particular with the eyes, because then they might be like, oh my gosh, this other house came on the market. Can I see that too? Well, we're under contract. No. So be careful about that kind of thing. They will make snap decisions, but most definitely are likely to get buyer's remorse later. So be very careful about that and misjudging them with that. Get distracted very easily. I would say be aware that you need to keep them on a timeline. This is probably your buyer who you have to remind they have to make loan application. This is the buyer that the lender is going to call you and say, they still haven't sent me their W-2s. So we have to keep them on track. Remember what we said in the beginning? They're the most likely one to say they're going to do it and not. So those important things we have to constantly, that's where our part of value and service comes in. We're helping them understand these are things they're going to have to do. They will not be happy because they don't know how to handle the situation when things go bad. They like fun, cheery. So when things go bad and out of control, they're going to be way more disappointed than some other personality types. I want to be mindful of time. So questions about eyes make sense or examples. Agree, disagree. Janice, I'll throw it out there. How do you feel that is relevant in appointments you've been on?
I agree. I feel like with the eye, you also have to keep in your head that, you know, eyes are relational. And so it's and your personality type may not be relational. So you have to kind of understand that. I feel like my eye takes over when I'm in appointments, and I feel like I want all my clients to be my friend. And I have to understand that not all of my clients are going to be my friend after this transaction is over. So I may have to quiet my eye a little bit and let my D take over, depending on my client. So you just have to know how that personality type, how that eye impacts you to get the most out of the appointment.
Wouldn't you also agree? A high eye, they've probably already friend requested you on social media and they want you to do a smiling post about them and tag them in it.
Yeah.
They for sure do. Whereas a C in particular might be like, oh, heck no, don't even, I may not even be on social media, right? Very private.
Right.
So be careful.
The eyes want all the pictures outside the house. They want.
Yep.
They're like, when did you post the picture? Like they're that kind of people.
And an S as well, I would say in that regard. Your CDs, it's a permission thing with them as well, for sure.
For sure.
Show up with balloons for your I's and S's, but the D might be like, wow, I'd rather have just had cash, you know?
Right.
So for
These
sure.
are like, can you just give me the code? I'll get the key out the box. Like they don't even care about you coming and meeting them.
That's right, for sure. Working with sellers for S's. Be on time. They will probably be early and waiting. They're super nice. Again, people pleasers, and truly want everyone to be happy, but they can also be very cautious with that. And so they're looking for being with someone that they're working with is someone they can actually count on and trust. So it's so important to be able to express to them how much you've got this, because they want to know if there's any issues that come up later that you will take care of it for them. However, do not make decisions for people. Do not hide things from them because that bites us later when we can't get something resolved. But we want to keep them off the roller coaster ride of this could happen, this can happen, this can happen kind of a thing too. So be really careful. They're for the lack of better terms, more nervous ninny-ish than like a D would be, right? So they're going to be more cautious that way. Sending them information, of course, before you go. They could appear shy and quiet, so be careful if you're a D, ID, whatever, that you will overtalk them and then they will never get in a word. And it just because there's long pauses of silence, and I know our DIs out there, feel like they have to fill those voids of quiet. They're just thinking. And they also want to speak, so you have to give them time. If they're not talking, ask them questions. They actually do want to, in fact, be heard. So don't, overtalk them too much. That will frighten them. It's very easy to plow through those people. So later, I have, my daughter's mother-in-law is a high S. And so I'll call her about a plan for a holiday or a cookout or something like that. And she's all, thank you so much. We love to be included. That's amazing. Yes, yes, that works. And I'm thinking we've got a plan. And then I get a call from my daughter going, what did you do? She called Johnny and said that you blah, 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 and you took over because she was planning on doing it. And I'm like, what? What just happened? It was an invitation. So they're not necessarily people that want to, they're gonna say it's okay, even if it's not, right? So be very careful about gauging that. And then they may view that as you, although in my perspective, I'm an organized person. I like plans. S's and I's don't necessarily like plans. They would rather go on vacation and just kind of roll with it, where I have had reservations made for every detail of every single thing we're going to do when we're going. And I know that might drive some people crazy, as well as it does. I'm crazy if we don't have a plan, whereas sometimes they're a little more nervous about the plan. So again, be careful not to plow over that. So at a listing appointment, don't presume things and don't think too far ahead. Let them understand that you understand the importance, that they trust you, and that once they say it's okay to lead the way. So be mindful of that. They can be also very modest. So be careful of how you speak. Don't, I'm not saying we want to be ourselves, but don't be too much yourself sometimes, right? So be careful about the things that you say. They don't like to be bulldozed, but they do have a tendency to allow that to happen. Don't be overly chatty. Don't have too big of a personality. I think that an S has a harder time with an I. Being overly chatty and friendly, being honest and straightforward, understanding that they will be the person who might have second thoughts and does need to sleep on it, think on it, pray on it, talk to others about it. We don't want buyer's remorse, and that might happen, or seller's remorse in this case too. I've had S's tell me that everything looks great on the MLS, and then to call me back 2 days later and says that they slept on it and they reviewed things and they didn't like the photos, or they didn't like your remarks, but they told you 3 days ago that everything looked great. They might then be disappointed, and at some point you'll find out that was why, or they'll go through the whole listing with you, and then later you find out that they were unhappy the whole time. And you're like, what? How could that even happen? But they just didn't want to tell you till the end. So you have to be really well aware that they might not, it's not about an honesty thing. It's just, they want to make you happy, and it would be really uncomfortable for them to call you out on something. They might do it better in an email rather than to your face. So be careful about that. Working with them with buyers, have a full understanding of their needs, and also which we do with everyone, but let them know that you have a full understanding of their needs, and send them houses and follow up. They also might not want to bother you. So I caution you this is your buyer who says, oh, I know you're so busy, so I didn't want to bother you. So we went to the open house and we made an offer. That's definitely can happen with your S, because they just didn't want to bother you, and they didn't think they were going to like the house they saw at open house. So be very careful about explaining to them how that part will go. Giving them good information on things, but don't talk too much, asking them questions, because they, again, want to be heard and understood, so that they can trust that you understand, how you're going to help them. They may want to make an offer on a house, but they need to know that you are offering that. Do you want to make an offer? Don't overwhelm them. Their pace might be different. They're also the most patient people. So you, to being what your personality type is, cannot maybe understand that they're just being patient where you're not. And I would say I's and D's are probably included in the impatient category, but C's could also be impatient in their own way too. So be aware of that. They're most likely to get buyer's remorse if you push them into a decision. So there's definitely, let's be careful of pushing certain personalities into decisions. We don't want that buyer's remorse. They have to have time to think about it.
I'll add one thing about S's.
Yeah.
I feel like S's are very they want security, they want safety. And so
Yes.
and they also are like big on like family and that family unit. And the way to win with an S, or to get an S to trust you, if you're on that flip side, like a DI, or if S is not in your wheelhouse per se, is to connect from a family standpoint and from a security standpoint. Like S's are gonna ask you, they're gonna ask you, what do you think about this house? Do you think I should buy it? Or
Yes.
do you think I should list it? Or should I do this? They're gonna ask you a lot of questions and ask for your approval on what they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, we want to, certain things we're doing the same, we're just modifying it slightly with our personality, which is how we convey that information, you know? So as you saw, there was a lot of similar things across the board, like sending everybody the information, being on time. It's also just how we convey our personality and the message about different things. Working with C's. So fun time, lots of patience needs to come from you with a C, depending on your personality type. From one C to another, then you can appreciate that they are being mindful and like details. When you're not that, your impatience might kick in. So be ready for it. Ooh, help my battery's about dying here. So I'm working with sellers. It's about the details, statistics. Be exactly on time. Do not be early. Do not be late. Be very professional and very well prepared. They will absolutely know if you're not. They are overthinking things all the time. Talk slowly and don't fluff anything. It's not that they don't care that you like the house or not, but it's not about fluff, right? Take very good notes when you're around them. They want to know that you're detailed too. They would prefer you actually be a C personality, honestly. They can't understand why you would not. Go over things line by line and ask them if they have questions. Allow them plenty of time to look over things and ask very detailed questions. They don't like chit chat, so get to the point. Bring a very detailed CMA and lots of comps, graphs, comparables, spreadsheets, things like that. Go over a timeline in great detail and next steps. They want to know what to expect. So send them as much information beforehand. They'll probably have the packet printed, highlighted on the table with a list of questions that you send it to them. So most definitely send things beforehand and let them know that it's coming. They definitely are very, when I say easy decision makers, they're just very decisive. So it's not hard to make a decision as long as they understand all of it and agree with it that way. It's not going to be a wishy-washy. If they need time to think about it, it's to review information. It's not I'm processing it overnight to think. It's I might just need more time to look at the information. I've had sellers where 2 days later, I'm on line 79 of the contract and I have another question. And 3 days later, now I'm on line 119 and I have another question, because they're really looking at absorbing that information in great detail. Nothing sloppy, no misspellings. Make sure everything is neat and able to be looked at properly. So if you have bad handwriting like I do it on dot loop and then print it. Be able to get them copies of the paperwork they sign immediately. This is going to be the person who's going to be very hesitant. They think that their signature is something that could get them in trouble, meaning they're going to be hesitant to sign because they think you're going to steal their identity or something. So that's it's golden signature kind of thing where a high eye is like, oh, where do I sign? No, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So be mindful of that. And then when you're working with them and buyers, it's very simple as a buyer to be very detailed in your conversations and having them have a full understanding that you know what they want, and only send them the properties that they actually told you that they were looking for. So that criteria should not be stretched too far. If you send them something that's outside of what they told you, they're gonna be like, why would you send that to me? I don't need 25 more choices. I'm very decisive, and I thought that I conveyed to you that I have to have a 3-bedroom. Why did you send me a 4-bedroom kind of a thing? So you really have to be careful. They are very detailed and be very organized. Sorry, I'm feeling rushed because I know there's another class right afterwards. So always being very mindful, but don't rush them. They want to take their own time to make their decisions, but they will make them and they will stick with them. They like to have their ducks in a row, and they like to go over the offer process as soon as possible. Take your opportunity to do a buyer consultation and explain to them what that process is going to look like. Maybe even go over a purchase agreement with them prior to making an offer. Give them detailed options, very detailed, oftentimes in writing. They won't have buyer's remorse because they won't get that far. They're afraid to move forward without knowing that this was a good decision. They won't necessarily show you that they love the house either, because again, their personality type is way more reserved. They're not going to be walking around placing their furniture. They might be doing that mentally, but they aren't going to show their enthusiasm that way. You should also for sure say, do you want to make an offer on this house? They're probably also waiting to be asked. All right, I ran through that really quickly. Tell me thoughts, questions, or examples of working with Cs.
I'll just add one thing for a C.
Yeah.
They definitely should have the purchase agreement prior to even seeing a house, because they're gonna
Sure.
read every single line on the purchase agreement. They're gonna want to know what everything means on there. And if they don't see it prior, when they actually write an offer, it's gonna take them a long time to actually sign it, because they're gonna read the entire document. Also with C, you're gonna really have to explain buyer agency to them and what that
Yes.
agreement entails, because they're the ones that are gonna read it, like, and want to understand like how it impacts them the most. So having that upfront consultation with them is going to be key for a C.
Yeah, and don't be wishy-washy with your answers, because that's gonna make them not trust. So you
Right.
have to be fully scripted on those things for sure. Well, awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining. I hope this was helpful. Again, all of that information is here in the drive right here. There's some other things in there too, a link to some information as well.
So the difference for the decisiveness for the Cs and the S's, the C is actually thinking about everything that's going on, and the S is just scared they're gonna make their own choice.
So partly that, the Cs are going to, the S is gonna say, I need to sleep on it because I want to in my head feel something.
Okay.
Where the C is going to be, I need to read more details about that decision.
So having them have that detail.
Yeah, it's an emotion thing for the S, and it's a detailed thing for the C.
Okay.
Both of them can take, if you send them. So I have a client who falls in this category. She may say, I like this house. I want write an offer. I send her the offer. She never signs it because she needs to either think about it or crunch numbers or,
Yes.
all of that. Like, it takes them a while. So if a house has a deadline for an offer, it's going to be harder for them to meet that deadline because they have more processing to do.
Sure. One's emotion, one's detail.
Yeah.
That way. Awesome, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gina.